Doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inspired and Empowered Living TV show and podcast for a thriving business and life. We are live on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on talk4tv.com, w4wn.com, and my YouTube channel. And today we are continuing to talk about the hidden psychology behind repeating relationship patterns in your life and business. We're doing part 2, but we're going to talk a little bit and recap and share a little bit more about part 1. Today, we'll be talking and going deeper into how to break the pattern, how to shift those repeating relationship patterns. And we're going to talk more about what you need to do to make those shifts. So last week we talked about how patterns, those repeating patterns, are unconscious. They are learned from past experiences, and they repeat because they feel familiar. And so what we're going to do today is go from that awareness into how you can transform it. Now, you don't break a pattern by thinking differently. You break the pattern by responding differently. And we'll talk about those practical ways to shift those patterns. And what I also want to remind you is it brings up the difference between reaction and responding. So when you get triggered, you have an emotional reaction, and all of a sudden you're feeling a feeling, or you're getting upset, or you're starting to think all kinds of things. What happens is, and then you may behave in ways that you wish that you hadn't, or you end up going into those repeating patterns with others in relationships, and you start repeating those patterns. Learning how to respond is empowering you. It gives you choice. And that's how you empower yourself. So let's go a little bit and talk about a little bit more about why those same relationship patterns keep showing up to begin with. And what happens is those subconscious patterns. Now, again, I'm going to give you the quick Psych 101 summary so we're all on the same page. Your conscious mind is the part of you that made a very conscious choice to tune in today. So whether you're tuning in live or you're tuning in at another time, you said, you know what, I want to listen to that Inspired and Empowered Living show. Congratulations. Good for you. That's your conscious mind, and your conscious mind makes empowering decisions. But what happens is your subconscious mind, from the moment you were conceived to present time, has recorded all the limiting beliefs, all the emotions, both positive and negative, that you react to or you can choose to respond to. And it is in your subconscious mind where you learn how self-worth, because the bottom line is how you feel about yourself is going to affect every relationship, and it affects every area of your life and your business. So if you have core beliefs and driving patterns like I'm not enough, or I have to prove myself, and a lot of people have that. I have to prove myself in relationships. Now, you may not be conscious of it, but it's running the show on that subconscious level. And it's important for you to become aware, because you can't change a pattern that you're not aware of. And we talked about that last show. Or another one is, I can't fully receive. So these beliefs, examples of those beliefs, will impact who you attract in your life, what you will tolerate, the behavior from others, and what you believe you deserve. So in business, you may accept difficult clients, or you discount your services below what you feel you deserve or what you think you should, and you over deliver to feel worthy. In your life examples is you'll accept unacceptable behavior from a partner, from friends, from relatives, even from children. And it's really important that you start really getting in touch with those beliefs, or you may go you do overgiving or overdoing to feel worthy. So again, self-worth sets the standard for every relationship you have. And then let's talk about creating new standards and boundaries. So actually, I'm going back to recognizing your patterns, because the first thing is you can't change that pattern if you don't recognize it, if you're not aware of it. So what happens in order to shift yourself into empowerment? Questions for your awareness to help you become more aware. What pattern in my relationships keeps repeating? What do you notice? Because the more you become aware of the pattern or what's happening, now remember, the pattern is not necessarily, it's not about the same person, but it's the same feelings, the same behaviors that you'll tolerate. And we talked a little bit about Jenny and Jimmy. And in Jenny's life, she allowed herself to get into a relationship with Jimmy. And even though the behavior was better than her father, who was physically abusive and a rager, Jimmy was a rager. So Jenny was getting emotionally abused. So she would feel those same feelings. Those were the repeating patterns. And then what were the emotions? What are the emotions that you end up feeling familiar with? With Jenny, she started feeling helpless. She actually would freeze, which is part of the stress reaction. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And Jenny would shut down and not be able, wanting to respond, but not being able. So what I call that shock, she was shut down. And then what happens where these patterns then override your intuition? Now, I really want to support you. The most important thing from this show is for you to gain that awareness. Again, without the awareness, you can't do anything. But with the awareness, you can take care of yourself or start changing them. So those patterns project protection strategies. Okay. So remember, you learned these patterns when you were young. And when you were young, they were protective. Now they're not serving you. And so it's not about failure, it's about recognizing the pattern. So then you can choose a new response, a new behavior. And again, this pattern once served you, and now you choose to change it. And also remember that you're not your pattern. It's more important for you to remember that you're not your pattern. You're and becoming the observer of the pattern. So, want to remind you these patterns are from that subconscious mind of yours. They are learned, they can be changed. And again, awareness is where the transformation begins. So let's talk about, and we have a question from Misty. Misty says, what is the best thing to do in override? So, the best thing to do now, one of the most important things you want to do to override the pattern, once you become aware, in today's episode, we are going to start talking about behaviors that can help you to override the pattern. Okay. But just to begin with, becoming into that awareness and then taking a breath. And instead of responding right away, it's stepping back and becoming more of the observer and saying, oh, this pattern is happening again. That is an important observation and awareness for you to have to begin the override. So we're going to go more into that. So, Misty, if there's more questions around that, please feel free to ask. And then we have Anastasia who asked, if we are not the pattern, is the pattern about to be broken? So, okay. So if you're not the pattern, okay? So what it is, first of all, what I want to remind you is I didn't talk about your superconscious mind, which is the higher aspects of self, your higher self, your soul, and the universe. Now, your higher self and your soul are much bigger than any pattern that you could ever have. And the more that you can learn to become aware and work on coming into that alignment, body, mind, emotion, spirit, the more you can break the pattern. Again, the first step is the awareness, and then there are certain things that you can do to break the pattern. So you are not the pattern. You are so much bigger, so much like vaster. Your soul is this huge, vast, amazing being of light. Okay. Not about. So if, okay, if we are not the pattern, are we able to break it? I think that's what you're asking. So, yes. Okay. So, what I really want you all to know is you have the power to break the pattern. It is within your ability to break the pattern. That is why we're having this show, so that you can become aware and start taking notice of where your patterns are. And now we're going to be we're jumping right into how to break those patterns. And again, if there's other questions that you have, please let me know. You know, I want to be here to support you. So first of all, it's understanding, again, there's the awareness, all right, is understanding the pattern loop. So what happens is you're in a relationship and then all of a sudden you get triggered, you have an emotion, you have an automatic reaction, and then you want to change the outcome, and then you want to keep reinforcing it. So, like, for example, with Jimmy, the pattern was he would get triggered by Jenny. She would say something or do something, and all of a sudden he'd go into the rage. He got really triggered. The emotion was rage. That reaction was automatic. And what happened is, as we started working together, what happened is Jimmy began to become aware when he was triggered. He knew that he was going to go in a rage if he didn't do anything about it. So he started becoming more aware and started using different coping skills, different coping tools, so that there would be a different outcome, which is him stopping the raging behavior, screaming and yelling at Jenny. And he went from being able to, if he felt like he couldn't overcome it, he would excuse himself. And I talk about the timeouts. He would take a timeout so that he could calm himself down. And then at a later time, Jenny and Jimmy were able to talk. For Jenny, her trigger, she would get triggered by Jimmy's rage. Her emotion was fear and shutdown. And that was her automatic reaction. And what she learned to do was she learned to say, if you don't calm down, I will leave the room, or I will leave the house. So she learned how to take care of herself. And as they continued that different behavior, it began to be reinforced. And you want to keep reinforcing the different behavior. So Anastasia asks, is the rage the pattern? So the rage is the emotion. What happens is the pattern is for Jenny, her pattern was being in a relationship where she's getting emotionally abused or some kind of abusive pattern. Now, when she met Jimmy, she didn't know that, but on a subconscious level, she did. And so what happened was she ended up in a relationship with someone who was a rager like her father. So the pattern is that she ended up in a relationship with a rager. Yes, the rage is part of the pattern, but part of that is that she ended up going back into an old familiar kind of relationship, even though she didn't choose it consciously. She didn't want it, but that's what happened. So Misty asked, did she unknowingly seek out that type of relationship? Yes, because on a subconscious level, when she first met Jimmy, she thought, oh, lovely, wonderful. Everything was great. But then she started seeing the same pattern. And not only that, with her, she started seeing the same pattern of what happened to her. She would shut down. She would want to speak. She would want to respond, but she couldn't. So that's another way the pattern emerged. So the pattern is pieces. Again, it's part of the loop. It's the trigger. There's a trigger that happens. Then there comes the emotion, and then comes the behavior, like yelling or screaming. And unfortunately, for some people, they're in relationships where there's physical violence. So that's part of the pattern. So it's understanding that loop. And here's the thing. It's about learning. It's about learning to interrupt the loop. Because if you don't interrupt the loop, it will continue. So I'm going to talk about the loop again. You get triggered, something's triggering you, and that trigger most of the time is coming from what you learned or something that happened to you when you were a child. You're repeating some kind of emotional pattern, behavior pattern. So you get triggered, the emotion happens, you have the behavior, the automatic reaction. And so it's learning to change the outcome. Once you have the awareness, you can start learning how to change the outcome, and you want to continue to reinforce it. So breaking the pattern starts with catching the loop in motion. Now, you may not always be able to stop the pattern, boom, like that. But the first step is becoming aware. It's becoming aware that there's a pattern that's dysfunctional for you, a relationship pattern, and you do not want that anymore. And then it's then starting to take and change those behaviors for yourself. So Mickey asks, when you can see these things in relationships, should you mention it to the people in the relationship? So, Mickey, I am going to ask you, are you talking about someone that you're in a relationship with? Or are you talking about people that you're connected with that have a dysfunctional relationship pattern? So if you could answer that question for me, that would be helpful. So if other people, okay. So here's the thing. If you're noticing a pattern in other people that you care about, that you love, the best way to handle that is, first of all, you need to ask them, would you like to hear something that I've noticed about your relationship with such and such? Now, they may not want to hear it. They may want to stay in denial. They may not want to make a change. And if they don't, you can't do anything about it. It's really important that you ask if they want to hear it. If they want to hear it, you can say, what I've noticed is that when I see this pattern that you seem to be getting involved with people who end up hurting you or end up treating you poorly or whatever. But if they say, no, I don't want to hear it, you need to respect that boundary. So that would be the best way that I would handle dealing with other people. If you notice a pattern, because you want to make sure that they want to hear it. So the next step is the awareness. Okay. So it's learning. Okay. Sometimes what happens is you get the awareness after the pattern. That's the first step. Okay. You get the awareness like, oh, I did that again. Oh, it happened again. Oh, I don't want this anymore. Now, the next step is becoming aware of the pattern during the pattern. Oh, I'm getting triggered. I'm feeling really angry right now. You know what? I am choosing not to respond because I know this is where I say take a time out. Because if you know that you're really angry and you may say or do something that you will later regret, then you need to excuse yourself, breathe, work on calming yourself down. If you're in a situation where you may need to park it, calm yourself down and then park it and then come back and have a conversation with the person. So it's about learning all of that. Now, it's learning when you've gotten activated, okay? And so activated is the same as triggered. When you get triggered or activated, you will feel that emotional intensity, like feeling that anger or even rage. Or maybe you start feeling anxious. Someone says something or does something and you start feeling that anxiety in your body or fear. Or you start feeling like intimidated or overwhelmed. When you have the emotional intensity, you have been triggered, you've been activated. So, for example, your desire to people please or overgive. And you may want to say yes immediately. What happens? And then you ignore your inner voice. Your inner voice says, no. So, your awareness is the place where you take your power back. It's your power point. Because as soon as you become aware, then you can go from a reaction to a response. I am choosing, remember, choice. I am choosing to respond in a different way. Normally, I would say, yes, I will help you. I will do this. I blah, blah, blah. And then this is about taking a breath, slowing it down, and saying to yourself, what am I feeling right now? What does this remind me of? And when you, and I also want to support you, you don't have to respond immediately. Take your time. Take your time. And you have the option and say to them, I need some time before you respond, before you know. You don't have to respond immediately. So that is self-care, total self-care. So what happens is the patterns are fast, they're automatic, they're unconscious. So the most important thing that you can do once you become aware that something is happening, that you're activated, that you've gotten triggered, it's pausing, breathing, taking a breath, saying, let me get back to you, stepping away. And it could be stepping away briefly, taking that time out. Or it could be, if you're really activated, you may need time to process, or stepping away and taking a time out for a day or whatever, being able to give yourself the time to really discover what's going on for you. And it is in the pause that your power lives. Because once you pause, you can then choose. So immediately, you're becoming aware. Oh, I'm getting triggered. I'm having a feeling. What do I choose to do right now? Now, remember, you're not stopping the feeling, the emotion. And here's the thing. If you're having that intense emotion, that's why I say take a time out and allow yourself to process. If you are able to come back in a brief amount of time, it's not about stopping the emotion, because you want to allow the emotion to move through you in a healthy, appropriate way, not acting it out. And when you react, you act out, you have acting out behavior, or you could have behavior that could end up hurting you or sabotaging you. What you want to do is you want to be stopping the automatic behavior. Okay, so I am going to continue this because I really want to go deeper into what you can do to be able to start breaking and continue to break the pattern. So, we're going to continue this show next week in a part 3, where you will learn even more deeply to how to break the pattern. And today we talked about becoming awareness. Awareness is your most powerful tool to start breaking that pattern. And then it's really becoming aware in that moment so that you can then make a choice in how you respond instead of reacting in the old ways. Changing the behavior will help you change the pattern. And we'll also talk next week. So we talked about awareness. We talked about some tools, the pause and breathing, and really allowing yourself to notice what's going on for you. So really important for you to notice. And like I said, we're going to continue on in breaking the pattern. And I know I talked about red flags, but we're going to go deeper into that, and so that you can help yourself notice red flags as well. So we're going to start next week with part 3. And I am wishing you, okay? So, part 3 of this same topic of the hidden psychology of behind repeating behavior patterns in your life and in your business, part 3. And I am wishing you all an amazing, inspired, and empowered day, night, and week. So join me next week for a live at 5 p.m. Eastern, where you can go into the chat. And you can also listen to the podcast on Amazon, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, and Apple, and many, many more. And so, again, I'm wishing you an inspired and empowered week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye for now.